Off-season action is back. It only needed one day of breathing room for us to just will the news back to the Buckeyes. That is Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. This is the podcast daily for Thursday. And yesterday, Ohio State continued its action on the coaching staff. Matt Guerreri is returning as the safeties coach. Not a huge surprise that the Buckeyes were able to move quickly and identify who they wanted to replace Perry Eliano. The ties with Guerreri and Jim Knowles are extensive. The knowledge of the scheme is deep, and he wasn't far away after just leaving for 1 year to go to Indiana. So, Bill, this seemed like a natural fit and probably not one that's going to send a lot of shockwaves.
No, I think part of the decision to get rid of Perry Eliano, I think, was recruiting motivated, as we discussed at the time. But I think there's value in having people in the building who speak Jim Knowles' language. And obviously he's been around for 2 years, so you would think that everyone there does so already. But if you think about the next steps that the defense can take, I think it helps to have someone like Guerreri back in the building. Certainly he was highly influential in helping Jim Knowles get his scheme established here in the first place, but he knows all the ins and outs of it. He was an assistant for Knowles and basically ran the defense himself at Duke after Jim Knowles left there to go to Oklahoma State. So it's just good, I think, for Ohio State to have that kind of familiarity with what they want to be defensively. When you combine that with the personnel that are coming back, you should be really excited, I think, about the steps the defense can take. And Berm can speak more than this about the recruiting piece, but he seems to me anyway to be a guy who's got an engaging personality. He's a younger guy, so I'm interested at the very least or intrigued by what Matt Guerreri might be able to do as a recruiter too.
He's got a really good energy about him. I know that sounds weird, but that's what Jim Knowles.
This is 2024 vibes, Berm.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Jim Knowles is about, right? That energy and that connection, and the vegan Buddha defensive coordinator that he is. That's what you want. When you look at a guy like Guerreri, number one, he's had 4 jobs in the last year, which is crazy. I mean, he went from Ohio State to Tulsa to Indiana back to Ohio State in a year. That in itself, you feel bad for his family. What a whirlwind. How about that? But this is a guy, people don't really pay attention to assistant coaches that closely unless they're on the team that you're rooting for. And this is a guy who was a nominee for the Broyles Award in 2018. So that was 6 years ago. How old was he at the time? Probably 23, something stupid. He's very young. So
it's a wonderkind.
He's a wonderkind. Exactly. He's that guy, Nate.
Ryan Howard.
Nate.
That's right.
From Ted Lasso. He's very young. He's been doing it at a high level. He's recognized by his peers as one of the brighter minds in college football and on defense. And that doesn't happen on accident. That happens because people see the work you do. And if Kevin Wilson wanted him on his staff immediately as soon as he took over at Tulsa, and Ryan Days and Jim Knowles have wanted him, it should speak volumes about where Matt Guerreri's career can go. And fortunately for Ohio State, now he's back in Columbus. And as Bill said, the important thing is to be able to speak the language in a way that will get the best out of not Lathan Ransom, who what you have there, but the young guys, the Jaden Bonsus, the Malik Hartfords, the incoming Jalen McClain, and Leroy Roker, and then see if you can get Jahad Carter to elevate his game to be a starting caliber safety at Ohio State. And that's why you need someone that maybe isn't going to freelance and doesn't have preconceived notions of what they want out of a defensive back, and they can just run it the way Jim Knowles wants.
Well, and for whatever weaknesses Tom Allen may have as a head coach, he also knows a lot about defense, and he wanted Matt Guerreri as well to be involved as a coordinator for Indiana last year. They had some fine performances on the defensive side of the football, but for whatever their lack of talent and overall schematic approach from Allen at the top comes with, they played good defense, and Guerreri was part of that. So he remains a very coveted coach. And if you look at this offseason and where we talked about moves could be made, we started at special teams, and they did make that move. Parker Fleming's been fired, but the overall conversation that we had didn't really include a lot of conversation about, the safety play wasn't good enough, or the secondary wasn't good enough, or the number 2 total defense in the country wasn't good enough. There were some things that we thought could be ironed out, and there's going to have to be a transition plan with Larry Johnson at some point with the defensive line. But it wasn't like moves had to be made on defense. If you were Ryan Day and Jim Knowles and looking at what happened in 2023, they could have made a case to say, you know what, this is fine. The numbers look good. they didn't make enough plays in the second half against Michigan, but they were still one play away offensively from beating the national champions. Just run it back. They could have easily done that, and they did not. So I do think that Berm has been saying this for the last several days, that like aggression, urgency, however we want to describe it, from Ryan Day. This move with Perry Eliano did not have to happen, but if they are familiar with Matt Guerreri, and if I think that I can confidently say they view that as an enhancement and an upgrade, at least from the schematic part. We'll see how the recruiting plays out when he gets that role for Ohio State, because he's not had to do that. Duke and other places are not going after the same caliber players, but this is a spot that they evaluated and they could have justified staying put and did not. So I do think that we can put that in the bucket of encouraging signs for what Ryan Day is doing this offseason.
Yeah, I think you have to every offseason. This is true of every program, I suppose, but especially at a place like Ohio State that has the resources that it has and the expectations that it has. You need to take a hard look at everything you're doing, whether you have a good year or a bad year, every offseason, and ask yourself, like, are we maximizing this spot? And on the field, like I would agree with you. Like the safety play was good, and I didn't have much of an issue with the way that Perry Eliano was coaching that. But the recruiting certainly left something to be desired. Perry Eliano was not necessarily a safeties coach by trade. He was more of a cornerbacks coach. So I think this is a move that makes sense if you're trying to align your defensive coaching staff in the way that makes the most sense and the way that gets the most out of it. And like there's similar hard looks required on the offensive side, and clearly a special teams coordinator, which has happened. So I do find that somewhat encouraging that Ryan Day is making moves that certainly weren't obvious, but I think, in hindsight, were not so much necessary, but I think makes sense in terms of trying to find marginal improvement, which Ohio State is looking for.
I just like when you get football guys who are from Ohio. And Matt Guerreri is a football guy from Ohio. And maybe that means nothing in the long term, but I think in the short term, especially where Ohio State finds itself right now, sort of needing to reestablish its bread and butter and the culture of physical dominance and mental toughness and all the things that they've been trying to prove to people that they are in the last few years. I just like a football guy from Ohio. So when you add that to this secondary and you get a guy who understands what Jim Knowles wants, and maybe it will get a little bit more freedom to do things creatively because they are fixing new pieces into the secondary this year, as opposed to having the Proctors and the Ransoms and the Sonny Styles who were all just set last year. Maybe it helps to just have a different approach, and but also from a guy that sees it the way Jim Knowles wants. So, I mean, I think Jim Knowles is clearly willing to experiment on defense and wants to try different things. And I think the more you have people who understand your vision, the easier that is.
All right, so that is one guy returning to Ohio State. The one who is leaving is Parker Fleming. And you can celebrate listening to the podcast. I no longer have to talk about Ohio State special teams for the foreseeable future. I know everyone got tired of it. I want to make it clear. I've tried to do this in the past. Parker Fleming he's a bright guy. He's got a great golf swing. I always enjoyed when he had the accountability conversation in November and talked publicly. I appreciated that about him, and talked about the criticisms that I had. He gave his chance to share thoughts. Like, I give him all the credit in the world for that. The on-field results quite simply did not match up. This was a move that had to happen. I think both of those things are fair to say and should be said about it. And the fact that Ohio State made this move, I would have thought could have come right after the season. They didn't do it that way. That's fine too. It's been made now. We can move forward.
Let's do it.
Okay. That's how should they use the spot, Bill? Like, you get to draw up the staff. That part is done. We don't have to relitigate the special teams breakdowns. What should you do with the spot?
Just make sure, I think, that it's allocated to defense, which I think maybe we talked about before. Like, again, I don't have much of a preference on whether that's linebacker or defensive line or however you want to do it. I just think you need another recruiter for that side of the ball. So that's what I would do there. And I don't know that there's like a ton of like urgency where like you got to fill that spot now. I think it's okay to let it play out a little bit and maybe wait and see how the offensive staff shakes out too, as Ryan Day looks for a coordinator, and then how the dominoes kind of fall from there. And whether or not anybody who comes in on that side of the ball has special teams expertise that could perhaps pick that up. Or if you need to use the spot now that you have open with the Parker Fleming firing to, I think, first and foremost, address defense, but then do so in a way that helps your special teams as well. So there's some flexibility there. I think Ryan Day can go any number of ways with it. Again, the only thing I'm most concerned with is the balance of the staff, and there's an opportunity there to, I think, right or wrong, that's existed for a couple of years now by giving the defensive staff another full-time assistant.
I am always reluctant to say we should celebrate someone losing their job. But obviously, from an alignment standpoint, this had to happen for Ohio State. And then if you couple that just with the alignment and then couple it with the on-field play, like this was obviously something that needed to occur. It's unfortunate. Parker Fleming is a great person. We've gotten to know him over the last few years. I think he's got a big future in football somewhere. If someone finds a position that he coaches, and actually he's helped Ohio State with the secondary, he's helped on offense, he's helped with quarterbacks, he's helped a lot of ways. And in the multiple stints he's been at in Columbus. And I think that he's a guy that actually has a pretty bright football mind and is going to be a successful coach. But having him at special teams where he was sort of just there floating in the ether without really any real other purpose, I think just makes it a expendable spot. Bill, the one thing you said is that it doesn't matter if it's a linebacker coach or a defensive line addition to couple with Larry Johnson, as long as you add a recruiter. And that to me is spot on. Like this guy, whoever replaces Parker Fleming on the defensive side of the ball, has to be an ace recruiter, someone that is going to be out and about and be the face of the program on defense, because Jim Knowles doesn't get out and do much recruiting. Larry Johnson, for all of his legacy and all of the success he's had, is not the most energetic, on the trail type of guy. Tim Walton is doing an incredible job in that spot. Someone else has to step up and work alongside of him on the defensive side of the ball. And Austin has talked at length over the last 5 weeks now about the odds or the potential of it being a Jason Taylor type defensive line coach from Miami. Like those are things like that's where this has to go, in my opinion. It's not necessarily Jason Taylor, but someone of that ilk, and someone that is going to walk into a high school or call a recruit on the phone, and that recruit's going to be like, holy I just talked to Jason Taylor. Yep. You know, like that has to happen. So whoever it is, whether it's James Laurinaitis, who gets that same sort of response from recruits, or whether it's Jason Taylor, or whether there's someone else out there that is of that ilk that we don't know about, that is where this hiring has to go. It has to be a home run recruiter, period.
Yeah. I understand that there is conversation and interest for Ohio State and Jason Taylor. Now I am not saying that there's a deal done. I'm not saying it's at the finish line. I'm not saying it's even better than 50-50. Miami is not going to let Jason Taylor go without a fight. LSU would certainly very much like to be involved in the Jason Taylor sweepstakes. I think if you're looking at rising coaches in the profession, and again, this may seem obvious, he's an NFL Hall of Famer. This is the person that the premier programs want to build around on the defensive line. Ohio State this is the time to take a swing. And if you have ideas about a transition plan and you have willingness from James Laurinaitis, which I believe if they came and asked and it said, James, we need you to do this for 1 year. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to guarantee you a full-time role next year if you're willing to make this concession for us. We understand that other schools are trying to hire you. They want to use your GA position against you in recruiting. If you can make this one sacrifice, here's why we think it's going to be worth it. If that helps us get Jason Taylor and turns him into the defensive line coach, primary defensive line coach, when Larry Johnson retires at some point in the future, whenever that happens. I think that is the home run optimal scenario. If you choose another one, or you wind up with a difference, if you cannot make that happen and James Laurinaitis goes to full-time and you take a notch down and you go with another quality control coach or somebody else who wants to come in as an understudy for Larry Johnson, that's fine. That's not, as far as backup plans go, James Laurinaitis is a damn good one. Like that Ohio State can certainly make that work. But, you know, to combine your 2 points, the resources have to go towards the defense. And that's more of recruiting and not an indictment of what happened on the field. Because as we said, the numbers suggest this defense was already pretty good. And with the pieces they have coming back, they're going to be very good. Denzel Burke made his decision on Wednesday as well. So you have him coming back. You have Lathan Ransom. You have Jack Sawyer, Tyleek Williams, Ty Hamilton. Like that defense is going to be good no matter what. But in terms of the reload for the future, having young coaches continue to develop, and having them bring in young talent to develop is paramount.
Are we all in agreement that however this shakes out, Ohio State cannot have a guy whose only job is to coordinate special teams? Like whether it's an offensive assistant who does it or a defensive assistant who doesn't, that has to be like a split duty situation moving forward.
Yeah. And I wonder who I should suggest for that role. I don't know. Let me rack my brain. Keenan Bailey could do that.
Well, like it wouldn't be Jason Taylor. Or like Jason Taylor's not going to come.
No, it would not be Jason
to coach the punt team while he waits for Larry Johnson to retire. So then that scenario, which I'd be totally fine with, then it would have to be an offensive assistant, and I think Keenan Bailey would make a tremendous amount of sense.
Here's the thing: you have like very good Gunnar Daniel, who's the assistant to special teams right now, is a up and coming coach that they really like. If you put him and Keenan Bailey on that together, then you're fine. I think about like Wednesday, Ohio State lands a commitment from a 4-star defensive end, Zahir Mathis from Philadelphia, right? This is a top 40 player.
Where?
Pardon?
Where's he from?
I believe it's Philadelphia.
Oh, go Birds.
North Philadelphia, to be more specific.
He's a top 40 player in the country. He's a defensive end. And again, this is the problem, not a problem per se, but this is the glaring concern down the road, because we never know exactly how long the Larry Johnson tenure is going to last. The minute that this kid announces his commitment on Wednesday, he mentions Larry Johnson. I'm committing because of Larry Johnson. I'm committing because of Larry Johnson. If Larry Johnson announces in August that it's his final year at Ohio State, for example, someone has to be there to take up that reign, because not only do you then take a guy like Zahir Mathis, top 40 player in the country, and basically shuffle that recruitment off. This is the class of 2025 for Ohio State that is going to need like 7 or 8 defensive linemen. It is going to be a huge defensive line class. Especially now you look at Jack Sawyer, Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, maybe JT Tuimoloau returning, all the other parts, the Kenyatta Jackson entering his third year. Like there's a lot of Mitchell Melton year 5. Like this defensive line is going to be like turned over 7 or 8 deep in the class of 2025. So you have to have someone, and probably 2 people in the mix, to make sure that whatever happens with Larry Johnson, if it's 2 more years, 3 more years, 4 more years, whatever, you can't get caught with your pants down in this situation and be like, oh, now we don't have a defensive line coach and we have 7 guys who were committed in December and now they're all gone. Like there has to be a plan for when Larry Johnson retires, whether that's next year, whether it's 3 years. Like I don't think you can wait. I don't think you can wait longer than they've already waited to start getting that in process.
All right, so that's defense, that's special teams, and then waiting on Ohio State to make a big move on offense. We don't have to redo the whole conversation that we already had, but I'm going to take a page from the Bill Landis playbook and just say a name, and I want to see the reaction.
Okay.
Jason Candle.
Intriguing. I mean, Berm is the Toledo expert, so I would defer to him, but I don't hate it.
I don't hate it. I think that it's maybe a move that's necessary for Jason Candle's career. He tried a year ago, or was mentioned a year ago, in the Miami offensive coordinator position. He makes, I think, close to $2 million at Toledo as the head coach, maybe slightly less, which is pretty good for a Power 5 head coach. He's in a position where he has more resources available to him at Toledo than anyone else in the MAC has available. But you have to ask yourself, what's the ceiling if you're in a place like Toledo? And he has not drawn the head coach interest that I think people anticipated he would after this season. Maybe that's because there were less head coaching moves around the country than people thought there'd be. But I do think that long term for him, a move to a elite program like Ohio State as an offensive coordinator for 2 years may be in his best interest. He's still very young. I think he's like 43 years old. So you could definitely see where that would make some sense. Offensively, he is innovative. He is creative. He's not a quarterbacks coach by trade, but he has worked with them at Toledo. It's not a bad decision if that were the way it would roll. Again, my preference, everyone knows, I want an NFL offensive coordinator to come into Ohio State. We'll see if Ryan Day can pull that off, but some of that's going to be contingent on the administration at Ohio State and exactly how wide they open those purse strings.
Well, when they needed to make that move on the defensive side of the ball, they opened the checkbook as wide as it goes, and they went out and got Jim Knowles. We'll see if that winds up being the same case here. Ryan Day says this is what he has to have to give up control of the offense and become the CEO, and this is the way of the college football world now. Can they get to 2 million? I would think so. If there's been an aspect of Ohio State's program where they're willing to spend money at a level that is different from a decade ago, it has been on the coaching staff. And, to include the other conversation, if we're talking about Jason Taylor, that's going to require a 7-figure check as well. So if those are legitimate candidates and we're fighting for information at the offensive coordinator spot, that has been as tight-lipped as any search for an assistant that I've ever been around at any program. This one has been tightly sealed. 2 people told me on Wednesday, keep an eye on Jason Candle as a legitimate option for Ohio State. Your point for what you want, Berm, is also correct. My understanding is that the top priority for Ryan Day is to find an NFL coordinator and bring him to Ohio State. I don't know that that's going to be possible for a variety of different reasons, but we can get into that at a later on point. Bill's word is right. It is really intriguing. This guy has run a program. Toledo, for its level, is very well funded with resources. They've won at a pretty high level and nice clip. I think it would check some boxes. Does that mean, again, that it's going to happen? Don't know. But I think there's a lot to like about it if that's the way that it winds up transpiring here.
LSU just hired Blake Baker away from Missouri as their defense coordinator for over $3 million a year, right? From my understanding, that is close to the number that Alabama offered Washington's Ryan Grubb to be their offensive coordinator a year ago. I think that the 2 million mark, which is crazy considering where things were even 5-6 years ago in college football, may be like a starting point for the Ohio State offensive coordinator spot.
Yeah, I mean, they pay their offensive line coach $1 million. So I all their assistants except for
Heartland's
Fleming.
Heartland's raise went to 1.5, right? So
yeah, Larry Johnson makes $1 million.
I think everyone Keenan Bailey makes $1 million.
Yeah, there's a that is
Tony Alford did not.
Tony Alford did not. But though I think they're gonna have to go higher than whatever that they paid Jim Knowles to bring Jim Knowles.
How much can they pay Ryan Grubb? That's the question. Give me Ryan Grubb from Washington, or give me death.
He's not an NFL coordinator.
He doesn't fit your criteria.
I'm willing to make an exception in this one instance.
All right, if you could have Ryan Grubb or Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel, who would you prefer Ohio State hire?
McDaniel, because the press conferences would be amazing.
Okay.
I would love, there's a lot of things I would be like, oh, that'd be fun. There's nothing I would enjoy more than a regular conversation with Mike McDaniel, because that dude is hilarious. And I imagine,
are his full press conferences hilarious, or does he do it in fits and starts like Lane Kiffin to make you think that he's entertaining when he's really the most boring person on the planet?
Have you watched Hard Knocks? He's a trip, man. And I get giddy thinking about coaches like that talking to some of the folks on the Ohio State beat and how funny it could be for everyone else.
Well, maybe he'll be available after they lose to the Chiefs on Saturday.
I don't think so.
Can they spare $15 million for Ohio State's offensive coordinator?
I think they've devoted too much to the head coach to be able to swing.
Okay.
Or Miami's not enough to the head coach to be able to. However, your perspective is.
The Dolphins' offensive coordinator, I think his name is Dave Smith. I don't even know if that's a real person because the name is so generic. But I think that, or is it Dan? It's like Dave or Dan Smith. It's something very generic. There's a good chance that it's actually just Mike McDonald and he's just getting 2 paychecks. But
I was going to ask, we're not going to end up in remember in The Office when Jim tricks Dwight into hiring Dwight as, himself as his assistant manager. We're not going to circle back to Ryan Day's I got the perfect guy for offensic coordinator. His name's Ryan Day.
Look at this resume. This guy's he's been in the NFL. He comes from the Chip Kelly tree. Look at all these Heisman Trophy finalists he's coached at quarterback. This guy seems smart. DJ Brian
Days.
I mean, it's about time. That guy's got a lot of experience in Ohio Stadium.
He's been there week after week. He shows up. He makes questionable music choices, but you can't fault that. He's not. He can only do with whatever he's got in the Apple iPod Shuffle at the time. Just hit play.
Can't fake the funk. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Harry P. All right. Well, that's a winding road to get to the end of the podcast daily. Thanks for joining us on your Thursday. A lot of coaching talk, and there's probably going to be more of it in the days ahead. At least hopefully. I don't want it to drag out for all of January. I'd like to get back to talking about some actual football things going on with the Buckeyes.
I want to go to Disney World without being interrupted.
I do want that badly. I wasn't gonna jinx it, but now we know that I'll have to be on the teacups, spinning around, breaking down the offensive coordinator next week. Can't wait for that. We'll be back again tomorrow with Podcast Daily. Thanks for joining us again. For Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham, I am Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.